Oh my God. Thank you so much for helping me to realize that my mic was up. Uh, all right. Well, I'm gonna have to cut out the first like minute of that stream. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Um, so yeah. Um, what I was saying, by the way, Pharaoh City, how are you doing today? Also, Scout says hi, and he's sleepy. So today we're going to be going over how to be a good friend. And specifically, we're going to go over how to be a good friend, signs of a bad friend, whether that's you or the other person, um, that is being a bad friend, and when and how to cut a friend out in a way that's appropriate for the situation. I was gonna include how to make friends as like a bullet point of this, but I feel like that should be a totally separate stream. So, you guys also like Pharaoh City, what do you think of that as a topic as far as like maybe next week or whatever, doing a stream on how to make friends and how to like maintain them? I feel like that's something some people struggle with, but yeah, let me know your thoughts. Also, let me know what your thoughts are on today's topic of how to be a good friend. Um, this was a topic that was suggested to me by one of our other viewers, so shout out to Liberace. She also suggested last week's stream topic on how to have a good relationship. So, huge shout out. I'm going to post my sources towards the end of the stream, but I used WikiHow and WebMD for a lot of these. Um, so shout out to them. Um, so you guys, I'm wondering, like, do you consider yourself to be a good friend? Do you feel like you've surrounded yourself with good friends? Or can you think of a time where you were a shitty friend? Um, I can definitely think of times where I was a bad friend. Um, and I think I've gotten much better with that over the years, but I will share some experiences of past me, how I worked past that and everything. So as far as quality friendships go, um, being a good friend includes being trustworthy. So that includes like keeping promises. So, do you guys have friends where, you'll make plans and then as soon as you get done making the plans, you look at your friends and you say that yeah, that's not going to happen. They're going to flake last minute. Like they're so unreliable that you just know that they're going to flake. When people don't respect your time, then that makes you feel like they don't respect you. And vice versa, if you're doing that to somebody else, if you're flaking, I think sometimes, and let me know if you guys relate to this, where maybe you are a person who's afraid to say no to things, and so you overextend yourself, and then you flake last minute because you realize that you overextended yourself. Um, that could be a factor. But frankly, in order to be a good friend, if you want to make plans with somebody and you're really not sure if you can commit to it, be honest. I made plans next Monday morning and then I realized, hey, I work late that night. I don't know if I'm going to be able to wake up that morning. So I was honest with my friend and said, hey, I might not have the energy Monday morning actually. So we'll leave it up in the air and I'll keep you posted. And that's something that I've worked on because in the past I had to cancel once on a Monday morning because I was too tired. And this way I could just be honest about it if I'm not sure or schedule it on a time that works better for me. So that's one way I've worked on being a better friend as far as like keeping promises. Um so yeah. Um also uh being honest. Now, do you guys struggle to be honest with friends? Whether that's telling them how you feel or being vulnerable with your friends. Um, you know, uh things like that. Um I know I had a friend who was afraid to bring something up and decided to wait until, and not just one specific thing, but would wait until something became a pattern before they would say something about it. But the problem with that is when somebody establishes a pattern of negative behaviors with you, it's much harder to break that pattern than if you sort of get out in front of it. And same with you as a friend. If you notice that you have a pattern of doing something with somebody, like say you realize, oh, I'm always flaking and canceling last minute. Well, what can you do to keep yourself from that pattern? If you notice you have a pattern of overextending yourself, what can you do to keep yourself from doing that? If somebody says something that gets under your skin and you notice you have a pattern of, instead of confronting that person, talking shit about that friend behind their back, what can you do to make yourself more comfortable to just go to that person directly? So those are ways that you can work on being more honest. You know, uh, Also being dependable. Um, you don't always only want to be there for the fun times. You know, I really appreciate, I'm really grateful for my friends because I could call them and even if they don't pick up, they could text and say, hey, like, I can't really answer right now, but are you okay? You know, I know that if I ever needed them, they could call me back. Um, and that means a lot to me that they check in and make sure I'm okay if I call, and that if it's an emergency or not. Or if I call up somebody and I say, hey, do you have some time to talk? They'll be like, yeah, what's up? And I have friends that are there for me. So do you guys notice yourselves having people who that you can depend on? Do you notice yourself being dependable? Do you notice yourself flaking out on people whenever they start to be vulnerable, or getting overwhelmed whenever they start to put any emotional energy on you? Um, how often is this person putting emotional energy on you that you're getting overwhelmed? Um, you know, Not that we're always obligated to drain ourselves, but it's still important to be there for a friend. So, let me know what your boundaries are as far as like where that balancing act goes. I'd really love to hear what your guys' thoughts are on that. Um, but yeah, so keeping promises, being honest, being dependable. Also, if in order to be a good friend, you have to be willing to apologize, and that's when you've actually done something wrong. That doesn't mean apologizing for setting boundaries or for expressing feelings maturely. Because we've talked about before, it's like your feelings are valid, but you can't. Uh, it depends on how you react on those feelings, that like how you push that responsibility onto people. um and so, if you say, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable with this, you don't have to apologize for not being comfortable with something. But because you're not doing anything wrong by setting a boundary. But if you um did something that hurt a friend, or whatever, like something that actually is warranted an apology, then in order to be a good friend, you have to be able to swallow your pride and apologize to them, and not get deflective, not get defensive, not make them be afraid to open up. So what do you guys think of that? Do you guys think of yourselves as a good friend who is able to apologize? Is it hard for you to swallow that ego um, when you need to apologize for something? Um, I know that's something I used to struggle with. I remember one time my mom was talking to me about something, and this is whenever I was I had a very sensitive ego at the time and wouldn't take responsibility for things. And my mom was like, hey, you're doing this. And I go, oh, you're right, I'm a piece of shit. And would just immediately jump to that. And she'd be like, you can't do that. That's not fair. Because that's just cutting the conversation short and not letting me express what I'm feeling. And I realized, you know what, you're right. It's not fair of me to do. And so I got better at I got better at that. I got better at apologizing whenever I was in the wrong and not just immediately going on the defense when somebody told me that I did something that upset them or hurt them. Um, Also, being vulnerable. Do you feel like you can be vulnerable with your friends, and do you feel like you allow them to be vulnerable with you, or are you judgmental? I had a family member who said, they're sleeping around a bit, and their family, anybody that they've opened up to, just makes them feel bad about it, and I'm the only one that they could trust, and I was able to help them schedule an appointment for like an HPV vaccine and things like that. And it's like, um, because I don't come at it with a judgmental attitude, I'm able to actually help her and be there for her. And I think being able to do that for a friend or a loved one, the more that you're able to just be open and honest and non-judgmental and not tell them what to do or how to live their life, and just be like, hey, like, I'm here for you and I care about you, that's what makes a good friend. So how do you, from what we've talked about so far, how do you view yourselves when you sort of tally this up? How do you view yourselves in terms of what kind of friend you are you thinking, hey, I'm a pretty good friend, or what kind of things do you think that you might really want to work on? um you know Also, being in the moment with people. I think that, as fun as it is sometimes to have some drinks or smoke with friends, being able to be sober with your friends and be in the moment and not just always watching a screen, I think that helps strengthen connections, because uh I've definitely had friends where I didn't actually like hanging out with them, and I only liked hanging out with them when I was, smoking or whatever. And I don't feel that way now with the people in my life, but I've been there, and I've realized it for me personally, that's something that works for me, is being sober and being in the moment with my friends. And I think that's really important in having a healthy friendship. Also, respecting boundaries. You don't want to put unfair feelings on people when they set boundaries. Um, you don't want to say, well, I do this for you, so you should do it for me. That's kind of the same thing as saying, like, oh, well, Joey said, like, if, Joey says, oh, I would fuck Susie, so Susie should fuck me. It's like, you can't use the example, oh, I would do this for you, so you would do this for me, because it doesn't matter if you would do it for them. What matters is their comfort level and their consent. If you don't have their consent, you can't just use the fact that you would do it for them as a reason that they should just deal with it, or the fact that your other friend would do this, so they should just deal with it. What works for different people is different for everybody, and it's not fair to hold everybody to the same standards. Um, that's part of respecting boundaries. So, what do you guys think of that? Like, have you ever found yourself saying that to somebody, like, "Oh, I would do that for you"? I remember I did that to my friend Kat back in college. Um, I forget what it was. I think she was like cooking, and I asked her to make me food while she was cooking, and she was like, "No." And I said, "Oh, well, I would do it for you." And she's like, "Well, that's not fair. Just because you would do it for you doesn't mean I have to do it for you." And that was sort of my first lesson in that. Um, so yeah, have you found yourself ever doing that? Um, uh, as far as respecting boundaries goes, um, you know, also, if I'm going through something and I need to talk to somebody about it, I'll ask if they have time first, so they don't feel obligated or pressured. And that's my way of giving them space. If I'm going through some shit, I'll try to like keep my composure when I'm on the phone and be like, "Hey, do you have some time to talk for a little bit?" And if they don't, then I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, we'll catch up later." I don't like to put my problems on other people if they don't have time, because I want to respect their space without making them feel like they have to set aside time for me, because I have a wide support group. And I used to be the type of person to put all my emotions on people, and I've that's something I've really worked on. to be a better friend, because I used to not be a great friend. Um, and I've really worked on that over the years. So, what about you guys? Do you guys find yourself respecting other people's time and boundaries as far as like if you need to talk to them, do you feel like you might have a tendency to sort of pressure people to drop what they're doing to talk you through something? Or do you give them like a healthy amount of space in order to talk you through stuff? Um, you know, also, as far as, setting boundaries goes, um, just make sure that people, don't take it out on you or guilt you when you set boundaries and vice versa. Also, being forgiving. Don't hold past mistakes against somebody after they've worked something out. Me and Kat went through plenty of spats whenever we were roommates, but she's never held any of it against me, and we're great friends. So I'm very grateful for that. Um, City says, I tend to drop whatever I'm doing whenever a friend needs me, perhaps to the point where I shouldn't. Maybe I need to be more selfish. I have a hard time setting up boundaries, especially with friends. Um, I'm curious, City, do you ever feel like that difficulty in setting boundaries manifests itself in such a way where you start to be resentful whenever your friends reach out in any type of way? Maybe resentful isn't the right word, but even like overwhelmed or stressed out, um, or like any type of negative feeling when your friends reach out because of that difficulty that you have in setting those boundaries. Um, and I understand where you're coming from with the need to um be there for friends whenever they need it. I find myself personally like uh I won't check text messages unless I have the time to respond to them. Um I uh I don't know. I guess it's a balancing act for myself. Like I've definitely been there for friends. Um, I'll usually message people and say, "Hey, how are you?" Whenever I'm at a good point to like listen to people. Um, I don't know if some people just have difficulty reaching out about when they're going through tough times or what. Farrah City says, "I can certainly feel overwhelmed." Yes. Okay. Yeah. And that's not fair to do to yourself. Like you deserve that self-love. Phoenix Star says it depends on the situation. Yeah. I uh I think you're definitely right on that. Like I had a friend, it was very difficult. And I don't mean this in a selfish way. Like for instance, okay, with this stream, I love helping people, and people have come on here and talked about suicidal thoughts, and I know better of how to handle that now. But I remember years ago, I had a friend who would frequently reach out and say they were suicidal, and I would drop everything I was doing, and it was really hard to be that person's only source of support. And I don't regret helping them, but it was very difficult because I would have another friend who needed help. Like um I had a friend that at the same time she found out her husband like was going around saying he cheated on her and all this other stuff, and I'm trying to be there with her as I'm there with her in person, and then I'm getting this text from another friend, and it's like I just felt like I was being torn in two different directions. And it's like um I just felt like it was hard to help everybody. And I'm not, and obviously, like, one of those is more urgent than the other, but it seemed like in some ways that my willingness to help out in that specific situation was sort of being taken advantage of because, like, I think there's a difference between just feeling bad and catastrophizing it to, like, like, when I think like I had some times where I was feeling like I had one time where I was feeling suicidal, but I didn't want to put that stress on somebody, so I just sort of calmed down and like just reached out to a friend without putting that pressure on them. And I'm not saying don't be open about suicide. I'm just saying like that was what I personally did because I was afraid to put that stress on somebody for myself. That's just me. Um, Pharaoh City says, I had a very similar experience with regards of being the only source of support for a suicidal ex. It was incredibly hard. I think that's also why I feel particularly overwhelmed now when people don't respect my boundaries. See, it's nice. It was touchy for me to bring up that subject because I wasn't sure how people were going to take it because I was afraid people would take that as me being, selfish if I wasn't willing to drop everything I was doing for that person. But it's very comforting to hear you share your story, that you relate to that and that you've been through that, because that is an incredibly difficult thing to deal with when you're the only support for somebody, you know. Um so that is comforting to read that and know, just not being alone in feeling that way, and that it's not selfish to feel overwhelmed. Um And that makes sense what you're saying about feeling overwhelmed when people don't respect your boundaries, especially after having gone through that. Pharaoh City says, yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing your story as well. Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah. Um, and I admittedly was that person for a minute there too. I had a friend that was like, look, I feel that way he was like, look, I feel that way all the time, but you can't just go saying that like on a whim just because you're upset about something because I'm stressed out about this and that puts that on me in this type of way. And I was like, you know what, actually that's a good point. And I hadn't considered it that way before. It's not bad to talk about suicide. It's good to be open about it, but whenever you um jump to that rather than focusing, like whenever you're stretching somebody thin, that can be really hard. And I think it's very important to widen your support group. Um, I remember there were times where I would reach out to an anxiety helpline because I just didn't want to bother my friends, but I still wanted that support. Um, and that's another reason why I like doing the stream, is because I can connect people to resources and things like that. But yeah, it is comforting to know that there's people who understand that. So, and nobody is obligated to uh handle it's okay if you can't handle somebody else's extreme emotional or mental weight. That's okay. Um it When that person is only reaching out to you whenever they need something, and every single time they reach out to you it's a crisis, it's like it's okay to not be able to handle that. But it's different whenever it's like somebody's been a long time friend and maybe they're going through a tough period, or maybe they're having a really rough day or some tough times, but they're there for you too. Friendship needs to be a two-way street. That's really important. um there needs to be give and take, or else it just feels like you're being used. um so Pharaoh City, in your experience, did you sort of feel that too, where it felt like, or any of you, did it feel like you were sort of being taken advantage of, in the sense that they could reach out to you for anything, but they weren't there for you when you needed it? Did you feel like it was a very one-sided or one-way street in that sense? Phoenix Star says, "Well said." Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to think very carefully about how I phrase this, because about this stuff, because I want to make sure I articulate it properly without it coming off as insensitive or in a way that minimizes mental health issues. Um, you know, Even, people get really depressed and they have trouble staying in touch. I have a friend that was like, "Oh, I always lose friends because I'm afraid it's hard for me to stay in touch with people." And he's like, "Look at us. Like, we stopped talking for a while because I didn't stay in touch with you." And I was like, "Look, I didn't know you were struggling with that at the time, but I know that now. And I know that's not going to happen again because I'll continue to reach out. The only reason I stopped reaching out is because I thought you didn't want to talk. But if you're going through a depression, I'll keep reaching out, and I understand now. And he was really comforted by the fact that I knew that. So like empathizing with that kind of stuff and like understanding the dynamic between somebody when you're attempting to stay in touch with them is also really important. I think, like, do you guys struggle with staying in touch with people? Do you find yourself like going days or months or years without talking to somebody and then not knowing how to pick things back up? Or maybe you've gone what feels like too long without responding to a message and then you feel weird about it. Um, I had a friend who was like, "Oh, our mutual friend forgot to. I didn't respond to his message, and then I feel like such a terrible person because what if they're bothered by it?" And I was like, "I promise you, this person is probably not bothered by it at all, and didn't even think twice about it. It's okay." Or I have friends that apologize for not getting back to me, and I've been telling people like, you don't need to apologize for being busy. It's okay. I appreciate that they take the time to reach out, but it's okay to be busy. That's just another boundary thing. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? Do you agree with that stuff? And like as far as what makes a good friend, do you agree with the examples I gave so far? Um, and we're gonna dive into also what being a bad friend is like. So if you notice these things in yourself, or you notice these things in one of your friends, these are things to look out for. But you want to make sure that you're a good friend and you want to make sure you surround yourself with good friends. So, a bad friend, and like I said, I've been a bad friend in the past, but over the years, I've worked hard to be a good friend and it's gotten noticed. So, I'm going to share experiences of both. But for instance, a friend that's overly competitive with you. I remember years and years ago, I went to the gym with a friend, and we were running, and I was like, I could run faster than you, and this and that, and I made it not fun, or I was just like smack talking, and it just made it an aggressive environment. But later, like a year ago, I went to the gym with a friend and she was trying to keep up with me. And I said, look, just listen to your body, do what's comfortable for you. And at the end of it, she's like, I've never had such a fun time at the gym. Thanks for telling me it's okay to listen to my body and do what I'm comfortable with. So, like that kind of stuff is the difference between being a good friend and not being a great friend. It's just the competitiveness. Pharaoh City says, I don't feel stressed out reaching out to someone unless it's been over a year since I last spoke to someone. Then maybe I start catastrophizing that I've been a bad friend. You know what? That's actually very interesting. Several of my friends that have actually even been on this stream, Liberace, she was an old friend from high school. I didn't talk to her since I was a freshman in college. I was 18 and I'm 28 now. I reached out to her last year, so 9 years passed where we didn't talk to each other, and we just kind of picked up where we left off, and she's one of my best friends now. Louis the Claw, we went, God, 7 years without talking to each other, 6 or 7 years, and I reached out and we started hanging out more, and he's one of my best friends, and it's okay to reach out to people after a while and just say, "Hey, how have you been?" If you're ever not sure how to start a conversation with somebody you haven't talked to in a long time, it's okay to just say like, "Hey, how have you been?" Um, oh, my lo-fi music isn't. Oh, that was way loud. It was a little spicy. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Oh yeah, get some beats in the background there. All right. How's that sound, you guys? Oh, it's in between a song. I'm gonna fast forward. Does that sound good? That volume? Get a little jam in here. Um. So yeah. Back to the notes. Um. Also, another thing that you want to look out for as far as being a friend is do they encourage bad behaviors? Um, Farrah City says, I think you're entirely right. After it's been long enough, I feel more easy about reaching out again. It's really arbitrary. Um, yeah, it is kind of funny how that works out. I'm really thankful for the people that I did reach out to after so long. And I think that makes sense about it being like the longer it is, the more sense it makes to reach out. Because it's like, hey, how are you? But sometimes, like, if you haven't heard back from somebody in a little while, like, I get what you're saying. I get it. After the stuff I talked about a little bit about my experiences, how are you now feeling about the idea of reaching out to people that you haven't talked to in a while? Um, Out of curiosity, like, does that sort of make you want to reach out to people more, or is that still not something that might be in your comfort zone? Let me know. Um, Another thing about, like, if it's a bad friend, like I said, they're likely to encourage bad behaviors, um like, for instance, a good friend of mine, I quit weed and he got me this art project where it's like a sticky sheet of paper with like little numbers and letters that you put these different color coded gems bedazzles on, and it makes a pretty picture. And he was like, oh, like, this might help you quit weed because you could do this as a go-to, like, sort of therapeutic project instead of smoking weed. And you know, versus I quit weed and I told a friend about it and they were like, "Oh, but you're funny when you're high." And that kind of made me feel a little guilty for wanting to quit. And so being around friends who make you feel good about trying to do things and have better behaviors, um, without making you feel guilty if you fall back on them. Those are good friends. So what category are you seeing yourselves in whenever I talk about the difference between a good friend and a bad friend so far? Or are you listening to this and starting to think maybe somebody in your life that you weren't sure about if they were a good friend? Is it sort of reaffirming whether you think they're a good friend or whether you think they're a bad friend? How is this relating to your life so far? Um, we did dive into that a bit, but I'm always interested to hear your guys' perspectives on it. Also, friends that are, mean or degrading, like they make you feel bad. Um, it's one thing to have a friend tease you about something that you're not sensitive about. Like, a friend of mine teased me about not realizing that this one shop I asked them to drive me to was actually walking distance from my house, and I just am so geographically challenged I didn't realize that. But I'm not sensitive about my inability to know where things are at, so I didn't get offended. But I was once in a group of friends where we would all rag on each other, and we would always take it too far. And that's, I'm gonna try to bend this down a little bit. There we go. That's better. And it just it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel good to be in that friend group. Um Ferris City says this is definitely reminding me of and reaffirming me of bad friends that I don't have in my life anymore. So I'm content with the friends that I have now. Well, I'm really glad to hear that. You know, uh it is really hard to separate ourselves from friends who aren't good for us. And like I said, I will get into later towards the end of the stream about how to, um, well, in just a little bit actually, how to end a friendship. And we're going to talk about like when it's time to end a friendship. And it is something that involves sort of a mourning process when you cut a friend out. But a lot of times it's necessary, just like a breakup. If you're with a partner that things aren't working out, it's hard to separate yourself, but it's a necessity for your own mental health. So I'm really glad that this is helping you realize, that you deserve to have people in your life that should treat you well. and to be appreciative of the people that you have in your life now who treat you the way that you deserve and who are a good influence on you and who make you feel good and give positivity into your life. Um, another thing that can be dicey is people who are prone to gossip. If they tell personal things about other friends that, they wouldn't be okay with them sharing. Um, like, I had a friend who said, "Oh, this is a secret and I shouldn't tell you, but this happened to this person that you know and blah blah blah." And it made me think, like, if this person is telling me something that they know this person wouldn't be okay with me knowing about, what am I going to tell them not to tell somebody and they're going to tell that person anyway? Um Nikki the Claw says, "You know darn well the gossipers will blab about your affairs too." You know what? You're completely right. And I definitely learned that the hard way. Nikki the Claw says, "And that's really discomforting." It is. It is. I sometimes look back at the things I've opened up with to people who I knew I shouldn't have trusted, and I look back and I'm like, "Oh, Danny, why did you do that?" But it was a learning experience for sure. And now I just don't surround myself with people like that. I don't really talk to people like that. But it is discomforting. It is disheartening when you trust somebody and they do that to you. Like, sometimes I'll tell a story about somebody that I'll keep them anonymous, and the person might not even know who they are. And I was talking to a friend, and they said, "Well, who did that? Who is that?" And I said, "Well, I can't tell you their name." And they said, "Oh, well, how many people probably have that same name? It's okay, just tell me." I said, "Look, I don't do that. I don't tell people stuff that I know that they wouldn't be okay with me sharing, and I wouldn't do that to you either." And because I established that reputation, like later on, they thought that I said something to a mutual friend about something that they told me in confidence, because of a conversation that they had later with that friend. And I talked to them later. I'm like, "Here's everything that I talked to about with that person. Like, as far as I didn't tell them anything that you told me." And I'm like, "This isn't anything that they would be upset with me telling you. I didn't say like anything." Uh, the way I navigated it, it's like I built that trust that he knew that I wouldn't have said anything to that person that they knew they wouldn't be comfortable with me sharing. And that's sort of like one of my commandments. I have like a set of commandments that I sort of try to follow. It's not like, the commandments, like the Catholic, religious, whatever. It's sort of my own personal ones. And one of them is like, don't share things about a friend that they wouldn't want you to share with other people. Um, Even whenever I have somebody on here that I'm interviewing, I'll say, like, "Hey, is it okay if I ask you these questions before you come on the stream? Is this all stuff you're comfortable with?" Um, because I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Uh, V Falcon or VI Falcon says, "But the gossipers usually don't matter. At least that's what I tell myself." I mean, you're right. You're right, exactly. Those people just aren't worth your time. And VI Falcon, you taught me that, as far as finding people who are and aren't worth your time, like wasting your time on people who just aren't good to you. Um, and that actually leads us into, ending friendship, when to end a friendship. Um, this is from Business Insider, and they reference three therapists that they spoke to about this. Sometimes you just stop clicking with somebody, or you've grown apart, or it's become toxic. It's become a toxic friendship. So in addition to the things above, I wrote above because it was in my notes, but I'm realizing I could just say before, that I said about being a bad friend, to look out for. These are some other things to consider when deciding if you should end a friendship. We talked a little bit about if things are one sided, if they're only popping up when they need something from you, if they're expecting you to respect their boundaries, but not the other way around. And if do they make it about them when you express being hurt? Um, if a friend always calls you when they need something, but you never ask, or they never ask you how they are, or vice versa. Like, do you take the time to ask your friends how they're doing? Um, and we talked about like keeping secrets for people. We talked about that. If they don't keep your secrets, also if they're overly negative and pessimistic, um, I've learned it's easier for a negative person to make somebody who's positive into somebody who's more negative and bring them down than it is for a positive person to bring a negative person up. You know, um, I became horribly negative years ago. I went through some stages of my life where I was a very negative person, and I've worked very hard to come back from that. Um, and I remember when I was around my boss all the time, who was always complaining about things or very negative. I saw that sort of shed onto me. I became very negative, and I saw another coworker of ours who was very close to her become very negative. Um, and and people were getting concerned about him because of the negativity that he was exuding. And I pulled him aside and I said, "Hey, man, like, I think what's happening is you're going through this sneaky hate spiral where." It's a reference to Hyperbole and a Half. If you've never seen that blog, it's a great blog. Check it out. But there's one comic that she did called Sneaky Hate Spiral, where one bad thing happens. It could be a minor thing, and then another shitty thing happens, and then another shitty thing happens, and you just start to get jaded because all this shitty stuff just keeps piling onto each other. That maybe something as small as opening a bag of chips the wrong way and it flying everywhere. You're just like, fuck. Like, whenever we did that ADHD stream and Taylor had talked about spilling a bowl of rice and wanting to smash the bowl on the floor because he got so angry, it's like that sort of anger sneaks up on us if we let it build up. And I was like, look, I used to be that negative person too. I would get angry over little things, and whenever you let that drag you down, it just sucks you in like a black hole. And if there's a friend in your life that when you hang out with them, you notice yourself being more negative, you notice yourself just getting upset about stuff, or talking shit on people the whole time, or whatever it is, if you notice yourself being more negative after spending time with them, then that's time to evaluate the friendship and be like, is this dragging me down? So now we're gonna dive into how to end a friendship. Um, so from what I've talked about so far as to knowing when to end a friendship, I know that we mentioned before. I'm trying to think. I believe Pharaoh City had mentioned about cutting out certain people, or stop being friends with certain people who turned out not to be good friends. Is there anybody in your life that you're realizing maybe isn't a good friend, or maybe somebody you might have a talk with, or ways that maybe you haven't been a great friend? Um, Let me know how the stuff we just talked about relates to you. Um, and um, I'm looking through my notes real quick. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was caught up. Um, so when we talk about how to end a friendship, um, it's important to ask yourself, is this something that can be worked out? Um, I spoke with a friend of mine recently about some problems I was having with a mutual friend of ours because I really didn't know how to handle it. And this friend is very pragmatic, uh, doesn't get emotional when I talk to them about things, and is able to look at things very logically. So I knew that they'd be a good friend to come to, and they're very good at, not going behind the other person's back and saying, well, so and so said this about you, or you said this about so and so, or blah, blah, blah. They're a really good friend to talk to about this. So, I knew that this would be a person that I could really trust. And I said, this friend is hurting me in A, B, and C ways, and I really don't know how to handle it. And what do you think about this? And he was very good at being like, that makes sense why you feel the way you do. And if you go to this friend and you say, you do this, that's going to like make him be on the defense. But if you go at it like, I feel this, I feel that when this happens, whenever you use I feel statements, that's going to make them feel less defensive. So that is something that really helped me in how I'm preparing to talk to this friend. Um, Londonderry Danny says, hello, hello. Well, hello, hello back. How are you doing, Londonderry Danny? And also, what do you think of the topic? We were just talking um, about friendships, and we're getting now into how to end a friendship. And that can be one of the most difficult things, really, especially if you have been friends with somebody for a year or several years or a decade or a couple decades. Um, Legendary Danny says, I'm good and the topic is good. Well, I'm glad to hear it. And yeah, I'm really glad that you like the topic. Again, quick shout out to Liberace. She was the one who suggested this, especially like as a follow up to how to have a good relationship. I thought this is something that could apply more across the board to people who, even if you're not in a relationship, everybody wants to know how to be a good friend. So I thought this would be more applicable to everybody. Um, but yeah. Um, oh, one second. Uh, oh, I realized I actually skipped a chunk of my notes, which is cool because I thought I was going to run out before the time. So I'm glad I have more. um, so when to end a friendship, another important note is compare your life without them versus with a little bit less of them. Is seeing them less possible, you know um and also trust your gut. If something feels off, trust that feeling. um and oh, actually, I missed a couple things. One second. Oh, okay. Got it. Um, if they are passive aggressive to you when you say no to them, that's another thing. When they make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, because guess what? That bleeds into your life. That bleeds into you feeling afraid to set boundaries with anybody. If you have that one friend that makes you feel shitty for setting boundaries, if they're dismissive of your concerns too, like if they say, "Well, you're sensitive." I even caught myself saying this to a friend about a year ago, and I had to stop myself because I realized, like, wow, I need to take a minute to like reflect on my friend's feelings. That's not okay. And you should respect their perspective too. Just like yesterday in our conversation with Richie, he talked about, being respectful for people who aren't into guns. Or I have a friend who's really into religion or whatever, and that helps her. I had a friend who their mother was sick and she said, "Can you pray for my mom?" I'm not going to sit here and be a dick and say, "Oh, well, I'm not religious." That's fucking shitty. So I was like, "You know what? I will. I will pray for your mom." And I did. Even though I'm not really religious, it's like that gave me at least a moment to reflect on what she was going through and gain that empathy and just like think about that for a little bit. Even though that's not my belief, I could respect that, you know? Just taking a minute to value how your friends feel. Like, it's okay to set a boundary, and like if somebody's bringing up politics and that's something that is really hard for you to talk about if you disagree with them, it's okay to say, I respect how you feel, but maybe this isn't the best topic for us to talk about if we both have strong opinions on it. Because that's saying it in a respectful way. As long as you're not putting somebody down. Like, obviously for me, if somebody's like anti-LGBT or racist, it's like, well, I'm just not going to fucking talk to you. I'm just not going to choose to be friends with those people. But this is a touchy subject, but this is just an example. Like, I have a friend who has been a long time friend of mine, very close with, um, and he came to me about feeling really sad about what people said about them for being afraid of getting the vaccine. And, I'm very pro vaccine, but I understand that their feelings are coming from a place of fear. And I empathized with that, even if I don't agree. I haven't always been able to separate my feelings from, what somebody else is feeling, as far as if it's something I have a strong opinion about. But it's like, there's some things where it's like, hey, you're a valuable friend to me and I care about you, so I'm going to take this time to feel what you're feeling. I know that that's a touchy subject, but that's just a personal experience I wanted to share. I was kind of afraid to mention that on the stream because I didn't know if I was going to get like backlash for like defending somebody who felt that way. But that's just an example of like, this friend has been a longtime friend of mine and maybe we don't agree on this thing, but it's okay to me if this friend and I don't agree on something, and we can disagree like respectfully, and I don't have to put down their feelings about it. Um and that's the thing is, um you know what's the point of putting that energy out there on somebody? As far as like whenever you look at whether or not to end a friendship, really ask yourself, does this issue itself matter more than the friendship? If you notice somebody, like for me, like I said, if somebody's anti-LGBT, like I'm bi, I'm not going to be okay with somebody being anti-LGBT. I don't want to be friends with that person. That matters more to me than a connection with somebody if they're going to hate a part of me where I can't feel like I could be myself. um and so on. um but if I have a friend that's like manipulative of me too, or makes me feel shitty, or does a lot of things like that, it's like, well, it doesn't matter if they put positive things into my life. If they're manipulative to me, that's more of an issue than the value of our friendship. So like, what do you guys think of that in terms of like, um I know VI Falcon had talked about like sunk cost fallacy and that concept. Like, what do you think of that kind of thing, in terms of evaluating when to cut a friend out? You know, um, don't ignore signs of a failing friendship because things don't get better on their own. You have to work at it, and if they're, if they walk away, don't chase them to try to get last words in. It won't help. Just let them go. Or if this person is robbing you of your joy, and don't let friends or family guilt you into staying into a friendship. Like, consider your well-being. Um, so now we're going to dive into how to end a friendship. And like I said, ask yourself, is this something that can be worked out? If you have this conversation with the I statements, not you statements, saying, I've been feeling hurt lately and you're part of that hurt, versus you're hurting me lately in all these ways. Or if they often shame you or do they often shame you for expressing your feelings, and it feels like pulling teeth no matter how many times you try to talk things out. um at that point, you ask yourself, should I cut this person out without a conversation, or should I have a conversation to cut them out? So we're gonna get into that in a second here. I want to check your comments. Just commenting to say, this is all good stuff. Oh, thanks, Legendary Danny. I'm really glad that you like this. And yeah. One thing that I've found very valuable to learn is this. I don't. Have you guys ever heard of this stick analogy? I thought it was really interesting. I actually learned this from Theremin Trees on YouTube, where there was this example of this guy who said, if you acknowledge this stick, I'll hit you with it. If you pretend the stick isn't real, I'll hit you with it. If you say nothing, I'll hit you with it. And the student took the stick and broke it in half so we couldn't hit him with it. And there are some people like that, where those are the types of people that you do have to cut out. If you have a friend that is manipulative or hurtful or violent even, you have to cut them out. That is the type of person that you should cut out cold turkey. For instance, my uncle choked my dad and then randomly texted me, "I love you." And I knew why he was doing that. It was a manipulative move. And so if I did respond, or sorry, if I didn't respond, I'd get lashed out on and be hurt. If I responded honestly about my feelings, I'd get lashed out on and be hurt. If I just gave him the response I knew he wanted to hear, just to keep the peace at the expense of my own feelings, I'd be hurt because I would be putting my own feelings on the sidelines. Um, and I still tried to talk it out. I said, "Well, you choked my dad," and he just went off at me and said, "Well, you don't have the decency to say I love you back." And then me and my uncle had a back and forth unproductive conversation that just caused me more stress, and I realized, um, you know, that's what helped me realize that there's some people that you really just have to cut out, and that's okay. Um, but if it is somebody you feel like you can have a mature conversation with, um, then consider, where they don't just make it about themselves and make you feel hurt for expressing your feelings. If there's somebody that isn't manipulative, that you can actually feel like you can talk things out and set these boundaries with, um, acknowledge the benefits the friendship has brought you over time, and express appreciation for the good times. Make it about yourself and your needs, not their wrongdoings. Um, you know, and again, using I statements rather than you statements. So, like, for instance, if you have a friend who, and I feel like a lot of people, let me know if you guys have been through this. This is a really tough one. But maybe you have a friend who drinks a lot and that's having a negative impact on you. Maybe that's, like we talked about before, being a bad influence on you, dragging you down, making you want to drink a lot. Or you just can't handle how they act when they're drunk. Um, that's really hard to handle with a friend. Um, and so rather than saying something like, "Oh, well, you drink too much," rather than saying that, oh, my throat randomly started hurting. Rather than saying that, you could say, "I need time to focus more on my studies and less on partying." Because then that puts that focus on you and your needs, and it's not pointing out their faults. Um, so what do you guys think of that as an option, as far as using, the I statements, uh, and as far as, are there people that you cut out cold turkey and you're feeling good about that decision? Are there people you cut out cold turkey and you feel like maybe you could have had a conversation with that person? Um, you know, um, Also, be polite and firm and cut to the chase. Saying something like, "I don't think we should hang out anymore." It's straightforward, it's honest, and it's effective. Um, that's okay to say, like, to need space. Like I said about seeing less of somebody versus cutting out somebody completely. And if they flip out on you for asking for some space, maybe that's a sign that you should just cut them out then, if they can't even respect that boundary. So that's something else to think about. Heligax. Am I saying that right? I am so bad at pronouncing usernames sometimes, I swear. In the past couple years, I really have learned to use I statements and communicate better. It's very helpful, but I also had to cut out bad people out of my life, people who can't communicate or respect boundaries. You can call me Helly. It's Helisa. Oh, okay. Thank you for letting me know. Helisa, and I shall call you Helly then. That's a cute name. I like that. um, yeah. Um, I think that's great that you were able to start using those I statements, and that's something I really want to work on too. Because I'm sort of just learning that now. I mean, I know that I've probably heard it before, but learning how to put it into practice is something that I'm excited to sort of take that on and use that as a way to like work on myself. So, and I'm glad that you've been able to cut out bad people from your life who can't communicate or can't respect your boundaries, because you deserve to have your boundaries respected. You know, I've gone through the same thing of having to cut out people who make me feel bad for setting boundaries, and I've had people cut me out, and I've learned from that and worked to better myself. Um, I never learned how to communicate my, or Helly says, I never learned how to communicate my feelings growing up, but counseling is really helping me. Um, I think that's great that you're going through counseling, and I think that takes a lot of courage to admit when you're going through therapy or going through counseling. I think it's very stigmatized for some people, but genuinely being open and honest about needing that help, I think makes people feel more comfortable to open up whenever they need help. And uh, there's nothing wrong with getting with using resources that you have to work on yourself and better yourself. I think honestly everybody could benefit from therapy, genuinely. Um, just like going to a regular checkup at the doctor. There's people who only go to therapy whenever they're about to have a mental breakdown. Um, but it's really important to keep your mental health in check. So I'm really glad that you're learning how to do that through therapy. My therapist, I go to therapy, and my therapist recently taught me that my feelings are valid, because I used to let people make me feel like I shouldn't feel the way that I do. And I realized that's not fair of me to put that on myself, to let people minimize how I feel about something. And I've learned, like, you know, it all depends on how you react on those feelings. If somebody says something and you say, well, fuck you, you're a piece of shit, well, that's not okay. But if somebody says something and it hurts you and you need to step away for a little bit, or you need to communicate, hey, that hurts me, and they get upset that you communicated that you hurt them, then it's like, okay, well, you can't put that on me just because you don't like the fact that I'm telling you that you were hurting me. You can't. It's not fair. Helly says this is also relatable. Yeah, it is really hard. You know, and it's hurtful too, especially when you've had a really long friendship with somebody, to try to be open about their feelings and about your feelings, and they just turn it all around on them and just ignore everything that you're feeling. um it is really hurtful, because then you look back and realize, wow, like if you find yourself afraid to express your boundaries to a particular person, maybe with all your other friends you can express boundaries, but if you get scared to be honest with one particular person, it's like, well, why are you scared to talk to this one particular person? And sometimes if that's the case, telling that person how you feel tells you everything you need to know about that person. And if they still make you feel like shit for being open and honest about it, it is time to cut them out. And I've come up with like a sort of term that, instead of ghosting, ghosting is just like randomly stop talking to somebody. But if there's somebody who you need to cut out for your own mental health, who is just gonna like uh not hypothetically, but the hyperbole, uh the fuck was it? That analogy I gave about the stick. If they're just gonna like quote unquote hit you with the stick, no matter how you try to communicate with it, or communicate about the issue, then rather than ghosting, I like to call it spiriting, which it's for you and for your own mental health to just cut that person out cold turkey. Um, but ethical ghosting, says Legendary Danny. I like that. Exactly. Sometimes that is necessary. And if it is somebody you can have a mature conversation with, you know, it's important to give that other person a chance to talk and make sure they understand your position, but most importantly, don't let it change your decision, because you spend a lot of time thinking about it, about whether or not to cut this person out. Don't undo it all just in a matter of seconds to placate the other person. Establish clear boundaries. Saying I need space, or we can talk, but just not hang out in person, or we just don't work, or we can. I had a friend say, "Hey, I just need some space right now," and after I had hurt her. This was several years ago, and I gave her space, and now we're great friends now. We just hung out not too long ago, and we just needed that space, and that's okay. Um, it's healthy. Uh, V Falcon says, or Vi Falcon says, thankful for spiriting. Exactly. Yeah. It is nice. It's a very cathartic experience whenever there is somebody that you can't have a mature conversation with, to just spirit them, or ethically ghost them, as legendary Danny put it. Um, and also it's important to prepare your defenses for their possible passive aggression. Prepare dealing with mind games when you cut them out. And very importantly, leave once you've stated your piece. um you don't want to keep nailing the head into a board to the point where the board cracks, or screw. Is that I don't know anything about carpentry, but I'm trying my best. Um, and you don't want to apologize for needing to cut ties with somebody, because you shouldn't feel bad for that. Um, Very importantly, shut down any revenge fantasies. If you've thought about saying something mean to somebody afterwards, or messing with them somehow, um, you know, it's just shitty, and it makes the world a worse place. It puts bad energy out there, and you're just hurting somebody for no reason. You already ended the friendship. You don't need to make things worse by trying to hurt them after you've already ended it. And then after you've ended a friendship, spend time with the friends who do treat you well, and focus on those positive friendships instead. Yeah. What did you guys think of what we talked about today? What did you guys think of how to be a good friend? If you look at what we talked about today, do you consider yourself a good friend? Are there things that you looked at where you're like, hey, you know what? I could actually be a better friend in these ways. Or, hey, this person is actually not a good friend and I didn't realize it. Or they're doing things that hurt me that I think I need to talk to them about. Um, or maybe, hey, there's this person that maybe I should just spend less time with. Are you looking back at times that you cut somebody out and wondering if you did it the right way? Um, you know, uh, I know I talked before about that conversation I had with my last boss, where I kind of like I got really mad at her, and after looking at some of this and learning about how to friend break up with people, I realized, I used a lot of you statements, and I think that put her on the defense. This person was very manipulative, and I did feel much better when I just cut her out cold turkey rather than trying to have a conversation with her. But uh I'm trying to think of instances where um if I've had a situation where like just friend breaking up was appropriate. I had a friend like friend break up with me, and that was hard, but I think that was definitely for the better, as far as like the way she approached it with me. Or even my friend that said that she needed a break. Um and I am grateful for that, rather than just sort of realizing one day like, oh, they're not responding anymore or whatever. But I think I've been able to be that friend that was understanding when they did come to me about it, and I think that's helped, versus somebody flipping out at somebody for that and then permanently damaging any opportunity to fix things, or what have you. Um Helly says, I think I used to be a little toxic, but over the past few years have gotten really good at healthy communicating and setting boundaries. I relate to that. Like, I definitely think I used to be a very toxic person, very selfish, and I think it takes a lot of courage for you to admit that, in the past that you were that way. And I think that shows a lot of strength to be able to have worked on yourself to get to a point where you can be confident in knowing, hey, I am a good friend. I do treat my friends well in these ways. So I'm really glad that, communicating and setting boundaries and stuff, that because that's also a form of self-love for you, and that's important. So I'm really glad that you've gotten to a point where you're more comfortable with that. Um, and Helly also says, I think it's great to hear you talk about these things, and it's definitely validating that it's okay to set boundaries, step away from people, and learn healthy communication. Thanks so much for saying that. I'm really relieved to hear that. It's validating to me too to hear that, because like, when I do these streams, I'm always like, I don't want to say always, but there's times where I'm self-conscious, like, hey, did I do a good job with this? Are people enjoying this? Are people getting something out of this? So hearing the feedback to know, like, hey, this is validating, or I'm relating to this, or this is showing me that this was okay, or that I was right to feel the way I did. I'm really glad that um the stuff I talk about in these streams is helpful for you guys, and that's really meaningful to hear that. And absolutely, I'm really glad that to be able to assure you that it is okay to set boundaries, and it's not just okay to set boundaries; it's crucial to be able to set boundaries and express your comfort zone. You know, even with my mom, I love her very much, and she gets anxious if I don't text her back right away. And I've told her, hey, if I don't text you back right away, I'm sometimes busy. It's nothing personal against you whatsoever. Or my little cousin video calls me a lot and I never answer. And finally, I was like, hey, I'm not really good with like impromptu video calls, but we could set aside a time that we could talk together. Let's do that. Um, and and then I don't have to sit there and be like, oh, I'm getting another video call, blah blah blah, because I don't want to be upset when somebody reaches out to me. I'd rather just be honest about my comfort level, my emotional energy, my social energy. Hell, I was at some friends' houses yesterday, as you guys saw in the stream. Um, and after the stream, and after I was hanging out with some people, them for a while, like just bullshitting, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the bathroom for 10 minutes to mostly just decompress from socialization. And like, I wasn't sure how they were gonna handle it at first, and they were all just like, yo, I get that. And it was so nice to just have them like understand that. So I'm really glad to hear that from you guys. And I'm probably gonna hop off the stream in a minute here, because I've said everything I have to say with that. But if you guys have anything else you want to add, definitely happy to hear from you. In the meantime, I'm gonna look for my little sign off buddy. If Scout is by my feet, he probably is. No, Scout. I bet Buckles is here. I'm gonna get him to come by shaking the treat box. Here, watch this. He loves this. Try not to like shout in your guys' ear. Thanks for streaming and sharing your experiences. Okay, well, Buckles isn't coming, so I was gonna have him help me say goodbye to you guys. But uh, thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate that, and I'm really glad that you guys care to listen. And it's cathartic for me too to talk about it, even though it was hard to say in some ways that I needed to be a better friend in the past. Um, you know, hearing you guys talk about your experiences and the ways that you needed to work on being better friends in the past and how far you've come since then. Um, it feels good to affirm to myself like I'm not the only one that's made mistakes in the past. So, um with that being said, thank you guys so much for showing up today. I'm really grateful for you guys coming. Um, and I will see you next week. I think I'm gonna do a stream on like how to make friends. Um, if you are subscribed to me, um, hit me up on Twitch or hit me up on the Discord, and you feel free to suggest any ideas for future streams. I'm always welcome to hear, always happy to hear your ideas. How to make dank friends. I'm gonna I'm gonna write that. How to make dank friends. I love that. Um, and VI Falcon says, thanks for streaming. These are important things to explore. Well, thanks for saying that, V Falcon. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Um, I'm glad you guys found value in it, and I definitely did too. Um, I like the idea of how to make friends stream. Oh, well, good. I'm glad. Then I shall do that for the next stream, and I'm really excited because I feel like that'll help a lot of people. I think there's people who really struggle with making friends, or even like we talked about before, keeping friends. Keeping those connections, maintaining friendships. We'll talk about that as well for the next stream. So in how to make dank friends. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining. Love y'all so much. I really appreciate you guys, and I'm grateful for you guys showing up for the stream and for your ideas and your input. Londonderry Danny says good night. Nikki the Claw says I could definitely benefit from that stream. And Londonderry Danny put the official Shorty Pop by Pride heart. I love that. Thank you. And yeah, good night to you too, Londonderry Danny and Nikki the Claw. I'm glad that you find that helpful, and I'm really excited for next week's stream. Also, one other thing before I hop off, next Tuesday, a good friend of mine is going to be interviewed on Tuesday. We're going to be talking. He works in at a nursing home, so we're going to be talking about healthcare in that regard, and his experiences. So stay tuned for that. VI Falcon, heart right back to you. And yeah, thank you so much for joining. You guys have a great night. I'll see you next Tuesday. Peace. Finger guns.